If you don't have expectations for yourself, how do you and your business deliver the expectations of your customers? Today, we're going to unfold one of the biggest challenges many businesses have. Madeline, so many times, I know this in personal life and then also just in the professional doing business type work, you stumble across a business, they come in, they want to give you a quote and you say yes, and then all of a sudden you're realizing they're not delivering to the expectations that you or the consumer has. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the first thing that creates that environment?
You're touching on one of my biggest pet peeves on that, which is customer experience for me. And what I have found is that everybody wants to serve everyone, but they don't even have their own standards in place. And when you don't have your own standards in place, how can you deliver on the standards of your customer?
It's a great point. And one of the things that I always try to figure out, even in people that we're working with, the first thing that I think people have to understand is businesses and business owners have to understand, what are your limitations? Because once you know your limitations, then you can set proper expectations. And I think that, we talk a lot about it a lot is, one, when you're working with a brand new customer or a potential customer, the importance of the intake form to truly understand what that person is looking for so that you best understand their expectations. And then, as we've discussed in other episodes, then does that expectation align with what you can deliver?
Mm-hmm. That is an interesting thing because remember in our prior episode, we talked about value alignment?
Yeah, in an episode, yeah.
Yeah, in an episode. So that is the problem, right? So alignment, like I said, is not just chakras. It's really, truly, what is your core belief in service levels? How does that translate into the service levels that you give to your client? How do you onboard that client and set the right expectations, right? In order for you to deliver. And that intake form, it's so critical. And 9 times out of 10, they come in, they'll sell you the world. And then once you pay them half of the deposit, MIA. You don't hear from them anymore. And then you as a customer, that it's basically the one responsible to follow up with something that you're getting paid to do.
Right.
So I don't get that.
Yeah, I don't either. And I know that, recently we've had a couple of experiences where, and again, it's setting the stage for failure when you don't sit down and really discuss this, right? So I know that you have a story.
Plethora of them.
And, I think that the one that I think is most interesting is when you were ordering this cake that you were having for an event, and that you went through great detail to define exactly what you wanted, what your expectations were, and initially, and I think this was a good part of the story. The baker said, "I may not be your baker," which probably in
theory,
in hindsight, would have said, "Okay, let's move on." Mm-hmm. But you did something a little different then too, is you actually said, "Okay, so let's discuss what I'm doing, my vision," and the baker came back and explained what they could do, and it worked for you.
It did, but I asked the right questions, right? Because the customer has also a responsibility here, right? And that's them aligning with that, the values and expectations of that business owner. And so that's why it's important to understand what that looks like for everyone. What I asked her, I said, what in the vision can you deliver on? Right? Because I had already interviewed a few, right? And so, and she did. She went on, and I'm like, okay, so you are meeting, I'm thinking to myself, you are meeting 95% of my vision. I can live without these things. Can we agree on this? Yes. Clear. No problem. But then the follow-up. Okay. A client should never, in an event that is that important, right, in any event, period, should have to follow up with the business owner. There should be a systems in place that allows that business owner to do check-ins, right? That's if you have standards. Problem is that what I see, honestly, is everybody wants to everybody's business, right? And like you said earlier, then they can deliver on the expectation because they don't know what the expectation is.
Right. And then because there's ambiguity on what the consumer or the customer is looking for, then there's downstream effect to this, right? Negative reviews.
Yeah. And then they wonder, why did I get a negative review? I did everything for this person. No, you didn't.
Right.
No, you didn't. That person had to follow up with you. Then you did not communicate effectively that there was a hiccup in the process. Now, what do you expect that person going to do? And the day of, oh, by the way, I didn't get that, but this is what I got. You didn't communicate effectively. I'm not upset about it, right? Because I really like the lady. And I think that, situations like this are definitely an opportunity for me to help her understand how she could, just things like that. Sometimes we take a look at our business and we want to grow. And we don't know exactly where the misses are. And it could be as simple as putting processes in place that your customer experience is such that they don't want to go anywhere else.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned this a second thing. So we talked about really setting and understanding your expectations, having a really good intake form, establishing a true process manual, for lack of better words. But I think where this can all get better control is in the agreement, right? And so a lot of times what I see is businesses' agreements that they put together to do service or deliver a product. And what they do is they clearly say that, but then they don't put in line the things that are the kind of what ifs, as well as the when I can contact you, how I will contact you. If you need me, these are the hours of communication. If not, this is what, if you do this, then I'll respond by this. And I think that setting the level of deliverables is really important. And I think simultaneously, what a lot of business owners don't do is they can say, I'm going to do this, and this is the time I'm going to deliver it. But if that consumer owes something to the process, that also needs to be in the agreement, right? Because it's easy sometimes, I'm thinking about, oh, I'm coming in and we're going to do an immersive, right? If we didn't lay out that part of the immersive is your pre-work, and that pre-work has to be done at least X number of days before the immersive so we can be prepared on the other things. If we don't lay that type of thing out into the agreement, then again, the expectations of me delivering the business is also off, right, to the consumer. And so we've got to manage both sides of this. And as the business, we need to manage it all, right? So we need to be having the follow-ups. Hey, by the way, this is due in another couple of days. Do you need any help getting it done? That little check-in makes that person understand that you're engaged, you're involved, and you're going to deliver on what they want, right? And so to me, I think that as a business owner, we have to find how we mitigate it, but then how do we make sure that everybody understands what they are, right?
So from your perspective, what would be some quick wins that they could do when they look at their business processes and see what's missing, where the holes are, that they can literally shift that customer experience right away?
Well, I think that the first thing, like I said, I think that they have to understand truly what they can deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do so, a lot of this stuff is just document what I can do or what I can't do, right? A lot of times we get asked something that falls into a legal space. Well, in our agreement, it clearly states we're not an attorney and we're not a CPA. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you need one, then you should go get one, but that's not what we deliver.
Right.
So you have to be able to look at your business and make sure you're not offering something or giving the look and feel like you couldn't deliver something. It doesn't mean you can't go out and get somebody to do it, but you're not doing it, right? And so you got to be straight up and honest with people about what you can and can't do. I think the other thing is I would look at my agreement and I would make sure my agreement is structured correctly and it talks in the right way. Yeah, there's the boilerplate stuff.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of boilerplate, people need to not use ChatGPT to create agreements. I'm telling you, I've seen it way too many times. It's like, seriously? That is the one thing that will hold up in court, and you have ChatGPT building it for you?
Right. And again, here's the thing. You're not an attorney. Most people aren't an attorney. So a legal agreement has to be written for the state you're in and you're being held accountable for. And I'm not an attorney, just saying that's what it needs to do. So I think you need to look at your agreements. The boilerplate stuff, yes, you can have that drawn up by an attorney once. It just talks about, it'll have blanks in it, the company, the client, right? All that stuff. It'll talk about payment terms, things like that. That stuff's all there.
Right.
But when you start getting into your addendums, that's where you really have to take time and put together, this is what you're paying me to do. This is my deliverable. Mm-hmm. This is when it will be. This is what you can expect, right?
Very clear expectations.
And simultaneous, as I said earlier, then if there are things that the client needs to deliver for you to be able to deliver, that has to be spelled out very clearly. I think the other thing is within your sales process, you need to make sure if you have salespeople that they are not offering something beyond fulfillment's ability and right? It happens way too many times that they're like, oh yeah, we can do that. Yes. And then the person that's trying to fulfill this is looking at them like, yeah, we have never done this. Right. And so
it happens so often though.
It does. And this is why people get in trouble, because the expectation was set by the first person they met.
Yes.
Unless you come back and you actually have the agreement completely accurate and somebody going through that with making sure they understand the deliverables and the expectations. So to me, that is not me throwing anything at the salesperson, but it is something that can happen. And you have to make sure your sales process is designed to deliver, to be able to communicate what you truly can deliver. And now here's the other thing. If it is something that's been asked for more than once or twice, then you probably need to consider creating an environment to be able to offer that. Yeah. Does that mean I have to hire someone? Maybe. Does that mean I need to have somebody get training in a certain skill set or something?
Right.
Yes. Right. And it could mean that. So we have to look at the whole organization. And then you also have to really look at what are my customers truly asking for? And am I prepared to be able to say I can deliver that, not 90%, 100%.
Right.
Now, I say all that to say this. Things do happen, and this is where you can solve it as a business quickly and easily. Pick up the phone and call your client.
Communication.
Do not text. Do not email. Have a real conversation person to person.
Yeah.
Because most consumers have a degree of forgiveness in them. When they don't have that degree of forgiveness is when they were told late or not at all.
I know. And I see it all the time in the moms groups where they talk about, their disappointment about the business that didn't hold themselves to what they said they were going to do. And that's just not good business, right? It's just a recipe for disaster. Again, integrity issues, trust, then bad reputation. Talk about brand, right? And brand is not just logos, right? It's also how you show up for your clients, in the community, and what people say when you're not in the room.
Absolutely.
So recommendations are critical and are part of business survival. It's so important. But, I'm not really sure what that is happening, honestly. I sit here and I think, I'm sure they don't wake up every day and say, I'm just going to try to screw you.
No, I firmly agree with you, and I don't believe they do. But what they do is
Overpromise.
Overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah.
I was just going to make the joke. I said do. But it's so easy to manage to not happen.
Yeah.
And I think that you used a great word, and it's integrity.
Yeah.
And if you have integrity within your sales process and what you can deliver and what you can offer, and then you hold your team to that. And, the worst thing that can sometimes happen is, and I've seen this with the fulfillment side. So I kind of dug on sales a little bit, but sometimes fulfillment gets themselves in their own trouble, right? Because sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, we can do that, right? Oh, that's not that big of a deal. I can add that. Mm-hmm. And maybe they can, or maybe they can't, right? Or now maybe that's coming back at a different price because now, the company needs to get paid additional for that because of more time and stuff like that. So the real thing is, just to kind of give a quick recap on a couple of things on how you prevent the situation where you're overpromising and underdelivering. 1, know your own business's limitations. 2, establish a really good intake form. Third is understand your agreement and make sure it's drafted correctly, and make sure that your Schedule A's and B's and addendums truly are addressing both client and customers' deliverables and setting real expectations on when they have to be delivered so you don't miss a deadline. Mm-hmm. And then really at the end of the day, make sure your salespeople are selling the right product to the right person. And lastly, make sure you are just communicating. If something goes awry, right, and nothing is perfect, there are always there's always a challenge that hits.
Pick up the phone.
Pick up the phone, not a text, not an email. I mean, you can call and say...
And call as soon as you find out.
That's
Don't call a week later.
Right.
Or wait for the customer to follow up and see that, hey, is there anything that I can assist you with? Is everything going to us according to plan? And then, surprise, not really.
Well, to your point earlier, in the agreement, you should have established the communication and check-ins, right? So that should never happen, right? Now, if it's a 2-day turnaround, it's going to be much quicker, right? But if it's a larger project, you just have to communicate what's going on, and things will happen the way they're supposed to. And I think if people just take those few things and enact that today on their next client, they will be in a much better place, get better reviews, and ultimately grow and scale their business the way they want to.
Absolutely.
So that's the end of this episode. So we hope you enjoyed it. If this was valuable to you, we would hope that you would give us a 5-star review. And if you know anybody that this might add value to, then refer it to them, because that's the quickest way that we can help entrepreneurs and CEOs just like you. Until next time,
let's get to work.